Hi everyone, welcome to our live stream chat this evening. This evening I've got Christa Rolls from the Birding Tools podcast. Christa is an avian ecologist and she recently ran an online course about bird identification, which I took, and I'm sure we'll mention some of that during the chat this evening. And Christa's in California, so we've got a bit of a worldwide mix this evening. And Faraaz Abdool, who you'll be familiar with, who has been a guest on my show previously. Faraaz is a bird photographer and the author of Casual Birding in Trinidad and Tobago, and he's joining us from there this evening. Trinidad and Tobago are on the same timeline as the eastern US. So we're all joining from different points of the compass. I'm in London, or near London. So it's the early evening here, afternoon for Faraaz and morning for Christa. So hopefully we're all on our, we're all full of energy this evening to talk about birds. This evening's chat is a general one to share our love of the birds that we've seen recently and the ones we're hoping to see. But we're also going to be speaking about ethical birding. And I'd like to speak a bit more about inclusivity in the birding world. And that takes a whole range of topics. And there are things that we can all do as individuals to increase the welcome feeling that people can have when birding. And I'm going to be sharing that and finding out Christa and Faraaz's views on that. But I hope you'll join in by sending questions in. If you're watching from the Facebook app, you will only come through as Facebook user unless you allow it to have your details to say the name. So if you're just coming through as Facebook user, it'd be helpful if you want to put your name in, so we can actually talk about you as by name. And if you're on YouTube, just write in the comments and we should see a username in there. Okay, so without any further ado, I'll bring Faraaz and Christa into the stream.
Hi, Susie. Hi, everyone.
Hey, everyone.
Lovely to have you here. And just to let people know at home that if you can hear some animal or bird noises in the background, we blame Faraaz because the birds are right outside his window.
That's true.
It'll be wonderful, actually, because I'm sure if there's any that particularly call out, we can ask you to tell us about them. It's just a shame that you can't just invite them in to join in the stream tonight. But
Yeah. I'll work on that for future episodes.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, it's lovely to have you both here this evening. And I know that when Faraaz and I have spoken in the past, we do tend to just talk about anything and everything. And I know, Christa, that we've been chatting online quite a bit. So it's really wonderful to have the opportunity to have us all together. So to open up, I'd love to know what birds you've seen recently or what birding experiences you've had recently that have really stood out to you. You can fight over who goes first.
I nominate Christa to go first.
Okay. Yeah, so this is a really great question. Things in California are getting really hot, and it's been, 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which is something like 35 Celsius, I think. Yeah, approximately. So it's been super toasty, which means the birds have also been fairly quiet, and, the habitats are changing a little bit. So as far as the birds that we've been seeing, they've been shifting lately, but I was actually backpacking in Yosemite National Park just a couple of weeks ago in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California. And we, on our way up the mountain, we happened upon a pine grosbeak. Y'all have heard me, I think, mention this just last week. And, it took a little bit of time in sort of the shade under the trees to get a good look at it and try and figure out what kind of bird it was. But once we got our binoculars up to it, it was more obvious what kind of bird it was. But it was exciting to see it, really, in the sense that it required us to start trying to go through our identification skills and going through our list of, okay, you know, what are the colors and where are they located on the bird, and where are pine grosbeaks found, and are they even found in the location we're in? And they are found in just a very narrow band in the Sierra Nevada mountains year round. So we weren't sure, okay, are we within that band? And for a little while we thought it was a red crossbill. So we were looking at that bill shape and trying to figure that out too. So that was, I think, one of the recent kind of exciting ones, because it was a little bit of a challenge trying to, one that we hadn't necessarily seen very often around here, and trying to piece all those different identification factors together to figure out what the heck it was. So
that's fascinating, because that's teaching that is using all of the things that you were teaching on your course. A pine grosbeak, is that has that got a fairly muted sort of greenish colour all over, so it hasn't got any major identification features apart from big beak, I'm guessing, and size?
Yeah, so the pine grosbeak, the male, actually has sort of a reddish or kind of raspberry color on the head and on the breast and different parts of the wing. So it actually has sort of a reddish color to it, like the male red crossbill, and the females are similarly colored in that sort of olivey, yellow, gray scale. So yeah, they're sort of similarly colored. The grosbeak has wing bars, so that kind of helps to set it apart a little bit more too. But yeah, it was initially seeing this big finch-like bird with sort of similar coloration. It kind of got our wheels turning a little bit.
I think I must have seen a female, and that's why I was thinking that they were yellowy or greenish olive. But now you mentioned that they're like crossbills, as you were describing it, are very similar to crossbill colours.
Yeah.
Faraz, what have you seen recently?
Well, I would say that I haven't been doing much birding recently, officially, according to the traditional definition of birding, as you would know that we're always birding, right? It doesn't matter where we are. But it's just been a lot of home stuff recently, because we're still on lockdown here in Trinidad and Tobago. So just really been enjoying the birds around our yard. But as for most interesting bird that I've gotten the chance to experience recently, I would say I'd have to go back to maybe about 2 months ago, and that was an albatross that someone found, and that was the first albatross that was ever recorded for this country. But it was sent to me by a wildlife rehabber who I do work with, a good friend of mine, and he sent it really for identification. So like that issue with the pine grosbeak, I had to delve into this sort of, it's a mystery hunt, right? To figure out, because I've never seen an albatross before. It's a bird that I've always wanted to see, but here was a bird that did not fit the descriptions of any of the albatrosses that I knew. So I had to as you would know, albatross, that face is so distinctive. So I knew immediately that it belonged to that family. I checked around and so on, and eventually settled on it was an immature bird, so it did not have the adult features, and it was a yellow-nosed albatross. So yeah, that was the first record for this country, which was great. However, it was the circumstances of how the bird came to be here are quite shady, and we never really found out with any kind of certainty where it actually came from. And unfortunately, the bird died maybe a week after it was in rehab. Yeah, so it didn't make it. So sad ending, but it was still absolutely fascinating to behold an albatross, and especially in a situation where I could have gone right up to it in the rehab center and so on, and really, as we say here, take in the vibes of the bird. It's such a majestic bird. Susie, I know you've seen them. and they are really like so one of a kind in terms of birds. So that was my experience.
Amazing. We've actually had a black-browed albatross. There's one that lives in the North Sea area. It made
Oh
its way
yeah,
up into the Northern Hemisphere, and
yeah.
apparently it flies its way around the Netherlands and the eastern coast of the UK. And just recently it's been seen at a place called Bempton Cliffs, which is a big seabird colony on the east coast of northeast coast of England. And yeah, so I've been seeing all these wonderful photographs that people have seen of this black-browed albatross, which is
Yeah.
the species that I saw, well, one of the species that I saw when I was on my trip to the Southern Ocean. So yeah, it would be, and it's survived here for several years. So it seems to have found a little niche for itself. I'm sure all the fulmars are looking at it saying, wow, look how big
Yeah.
you are.
I can imagine. Is it a singular bird or is it a
It
pair?
is. No, it's
Singular
just on
bird.
its own. So yeah, but apparently it's become a bit of a character, and it had not been seen for a while, and so people thought it had been lost. But it's turned up again, and it seems to be healthy. So it's really great. But yeah, it's a long way from home.
Yeah. Well,
I was just trying to think
That's
about
incredible.
it's amazing when you see a bird that isn't supposed to be in that area and it actually survives, because so often, we'll hear about, like we've had a mockingbird in the southwest recently, a northern mockingbird that had made its way across the Atlantic, I'm guessing. I haven't kept up to see what's happened with that, but very often when those birds make those journeys, they're very much weakened, and it's not often a good outcome. So great to see it, but I always feel I'd rather see them in an area where they're abundant and at their best. I was just thinking back to my recent experiences, and they're just my garden birds, really. But I shouldn't say just my garden birds. Although I did hear a nightjar recently. We went out for a walk on a heath near where I live, and with the hopes that we would hear or possibly see a nightjar. And we actually got there and heard one, and they're like they're in the family of I think you have birds called goat suckers. It's the same family. So they're birds that fly at dawn and dusk. They have a very wide mouth and they collect insects on the wing. But they make this really strange churring noise, and it will carry on and on and on for a long period, much longer than you'd expect a bird. So you start to think it's an insect calling, but we don't have insects that call like that. So it's a really strange sound. But I was busy making sure that I was recording it and didn't notice that it actually flew. So my husband saw it fly and I missed it because I was. But at least I've got the recording, so that's the important thing.
Of course, yeah.
Sean in the chat is just saying that he thinks the mockingbird was seen in the northeast of England, possibly migrating north, but on our side of the pond of the Atlantic rather than on its own side. And then the other thing I had this morning, I was woken up with a lot of magpie noise out in the garden. The magpie is a type of corvid, a black and white corvid. And we've got 5 juveniles that are hanging around at the moment, creating mischief, looking at everything, pulling things apart and eating flower heads and all sorts of things, exploring the world. But I'd left some peanuts in shells out, and they absolutely love them, much as the blue jays and Steller's jays do in America. And unfortunately, a couple of them had got into a tussle, and what had woken me up were these ones actually fighting. So I looked out the... Right on cue, Faraaz.
Yeah.
What was that?
A great kiskadee.
He's obviously upset with my story about
I know, right?
about magpies fighting. It's fine. I opened the window. That shocked them out of what they were doing. I didn't want to have a serious incident on my hands. But I think it's just like teenagers having the hormones and sorting out their territories. And so that's what it's been like in my garden at the moment.
I love
Susie,
experiencing that. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. What were you saying?
No, I was just gonna say that I love experiencing that with young birds, especially that when they're just so fresh in the world and they're playing and harassing their parents and so on.
One thing I was sorry, Christa,
They
you were
are.
about to say something.
I was just going to say that you always have so much fun stuff going on in your yard. There's so many
Yes.
adventures happening in your yard. And I think too, though, that you're so wonderful at paying attention to all those little details and storytelling, just conveying exactly what you're seeing. So it's so much fun. So
There's so many dramas that happen out there, and we just have to look and see them. And
yeah.
it's amazing. I was going to say one other thing, and it's totally gone out of my mind. I'm sure it'll come back. It probably wasn't very important.
In the meanwhile, I'll tell you a quick story about one of the birds that was right outside my window, nesting. There was a spectacled thrush, which resembles it. It used to be called bare-eyed thrush, and I think that's an old bird species, so now it's called spectacled. Anyway, there was one that was nesting immediately outside our window, this window right here, and what I realized is that this was probably the second brood for the year, and there was one of the last broods, juveniles, that kept on harassing the parent that was sitting on the nest. So she could not sit on her eggs for any extended period of time because this bird is just the young one is just gonna fly up there and just be like, give me food, and chase her from the nest and then follow her around. And eventually she gave it, and I saw her feeding the young one. And I think she lost her second brood because of that.
Oh, that's such a
So,
shame. But I can understand why, it's difficult for the bird that's been imprinted on its parent. It wants to carry on that. And I guess if there's not another parent around to chase off the young and make them more independent, it's quite hard to sort of be looking after eggs and defending the nest at the same time.
Yeah.
So, gosh, that's really a giant kiskadee. That's one of the birds that I saw. I think that was one of the first birds I saw in Buenos Aires when I was down that way.
Nice.
They're sort of yellow and brown with a brown eye stripe.
Black cap and white eye stripe. Yeah.
And quite a strong beak.
Strong beak. Yeah, they're pretty brutal. I remember when I was a little boy, I saw one beating a nestling on one of the drains that we have, just like killing it. I thought this bird ate fruit, but it turns out that they eat a lot of reptiles and amphibians and even baby birds as well.
Right.
So now whenever I hear a knocking noise, I'm pretty sure that based on the type of knocking, it's not like a woodpecker's knocking, but like a thump, a thud, thud. That's it whacking something on a branch or whatever to kill it.
Wow.
But again, something that you may not have noticed, you might have just ignored normally, and now you know what that is, what that behaviour is. Oh, I've just remembered what the behaviour was that I was going to mention with these teenage magpies that are getting up to all sorts. What I was really interested to see was, I think I've mentioned this on my show before as well, and I think this is a behaviour that is in corvids generally, or certain corvids, that they will pull the tail feathers of a larger bird. And I'm sure I've seen ravens doing this to
golden eagles.
Yeah, and to bald eagles as well on YouTube. So it's to get them away from a food source or to move them on. They'll go up behind it and approach sort of in the blind spot almost, so that the bird doesn't necessarily know it's there, and then just pull on. And that must be quite painful to have your tail feather tugged, because it definitely causes the bigger bird to sort of start and either move off or turn around. But they're always very careful to sort of approach carefully and then sort of pull, but then move back quickly, because they know that they're in striking distance. And they seem to know that instinctively, because they're only young, but they're doing it already. So it must be an innate talent for them. And Sean's up in Scotland, and he says he's seen hooded crows pulling the tail of white-tailed eagles. So definitely a thing they do.
Yeah. Susie, it's funny too with the magpies here in California. We have yellow-billed magpies, endemic to this region specifically, and they also have just recently fledged their nests, and I was birding, I guess it was maybe a month ago now, and I saw probably 20 fledglings just making all sorts of noise and with flying around with the adults and causing trouble, and they're so much fun. Their personalities are so much fun.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people aren't so keen on them because they do bully smaller birds. And I have seen a magpie take a house sparrow from the garden before, a live one, which I was really shocked at because I didn't think they'd take live bird. I thought they would just eat carrion. I thought they might take fledglings or nestlings, but I didn't think they would take birds, whole birds. But they absolutely, you can see the intelligence, you can see them figuring stuff out and looking around and just testing the environment and trying stuff. That I find the corvid family a really fascinating family to watch. And the magpies are one of the most accessible to me because they're always around.
Apparently, they eat a lot of blackbirds as well, like nestlings.
Yeah, and blackbirds particularly are very defensive if the magpie's around.
Yeah.
So, I do keep a watch out because, my blackbirds are one of my faves. So, although I have to say, it seems like every bird I talk about is
They're
one
all
of
your
my faves.
faves, yeah.
Yes.
Oh boy. That's why we stumble whenever anyone asks, "What's your favorite bird?"
I know.
Yeah,
Every
I'm always
time.
like, oh.
It's the one that's feeding from my hand. That would be my favourite bird at any one time. But, that doesn't happen very often. So, but I'm just happy to see them. And I'm happy if they accept me in their environment, accept me in terms of ignoring me. They'll let me be there, but they'll carry on doing their stuff. So that's when I feel really honoured. I can sit and really watch them. And one of the things that I've been doing a lot recently since doing Christa's course is I got really fascinated about the feather groupings on birds. And in fact, I might talk about this a bit later on as well, but I've really been noticing, because I hadn't really considered before, the different feather groupings. Christa, do you want to say just something briefly about the feather groupings and how that helps with identification?
Yeah, so what's really interesting too, and I think this is one of the things that you and I were chatting about a little bit, is where the colors are located on the feathers and how they're overlaid on top of each other, and how those different locations where color is located on a feather can help us with trying to figure out what species it is. So you had posted up a really beautiful example a little while back with the starling, I think it was, and how their feathers have just a little bit of a strip of white on the tip of the feather. And by recognizing the location where those sort of color patterns are located on feathers, that can just help give us a little bit more insight and information about what species we're looking at. So it's sort of just taking a magnifying glass to the things that we might already be looking at, instead of looking at color as an overall, start really dialing into where those are located on the bird and how those patterns can play in. But also, as far as structure goes, how different sized birds might have their primaries and their secondaries and their tertiaries when their wings are just sort of laid flat across their body, how those sort of change location on the bird based on what kind of bird you're looking at. So waterfowl, for example, if you're looking at your field guide and it says it has white primaries, it's going to be in potentially a little bit of a different location than if you're looking at a smaller bird like a thrush. So yeah, things like that can be so helpful, when you're looking through your field guide or when you're just trying to identify a bird.
It's really made me look at the birds that I'm really familiar with as well, because how best to practice these things than on the birds you're familiar with, so that you're ready with those skills when you get out into the field. And even noticing, so the starlings, yes, and dunnocks, having the ear coverts and the different parts of the head, and yes, definitely the primaries and secondaries and the coverts over those as well. So I'd urge everyone to really take a look at the birds around you and just have a look at a little bit more detail. Really study it. Don't just think, oh yeah, that's a sparrow or that's a starling, but look at the plumage and see how that's made up. and it's fascinating. I'm just like entranced by the whole thing now.
Yeah, for sure. And the more you look is the more you see. Because in addition to the feather groupings, like once you start to notice the feather groupings and these are the primaries, these are the coverts and whatever, then you start to notice like the real intricate details of each feather. So I've noticed that especially with some families like shorebirds and even nightjars and so on. Each feather is so intricately patterned, and together they make a color, or together they make a pattern. Like barring on the chest or even on the wings and so on. Like some feathers may be edged, some feathers may be tipped, others maybe striped or whatever. So it just gets more and more interesting. The more you look, is the more you see.
Absolutely. And I thought I kind of knew my birds, but I had no idea about this feather structure and the colour, where the colour appears. And so I found it endlessly fascinating. So I urge everyone to just take a look at your local birds and see what's out there.
Of course. Like just to go back quickly to the story I was telling you about the spectacled thrushes, how I knew it was a juvenile or like from the last brood is not because of the behavior alone or the call it was making, but it's also that the feathers, the coverts on the juveniles, on the immatures, they just have a tiny rufous tip, as opposed to the adults that don't have the rufous tip.
Wow.
So, like from a distance, you may not notice it. If you look through binoculars, you might see these little spots on the bird, and you might think, okay, well, the bird is spotted. But then you look closer and you realize that the spots come from the rufous tips to all of the coverts. So it's pretty cool.
So,
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, and then things like even eye color and, different kinds of colors like that can help contribute to, trying to figure out how old a bird might be. So, great-tailed grackles, for example, or, Brewer's blackbirds, when they're young, they have brown eyes. And then when they get older, they've got those beautiful white eyes that just pop out like.
I've been noticing that with the jackdaws that we've got in the garden at the moment, because the young jackdaws have sort of dark irises, but as they get older, they then get these lovely sort of steely blue-grey eyes that really pop out against the dark plumage.
Interesting.
Yeah, jackdaws are so cool.
Another really fun bird to watch, another corvid that will explore things and, just very cheeky, very cheeky. Yeah. One of the topics that I wanted to speak about this evening was ethical birding. I know I've touched on it a little bit with Faraaz before, but I thought it'd be really great to get both of your inputs into what you feel are the sort of key tenets of ethical birding and what things people can really consider when they're out birding themselves. Faraaz, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure.
We spoke about it previously in regards to taking photographs of birds, but could you say a little bit about what ethical birding means to you?
Yeah, I think it really centers around the kindness, and that sort of that would then precipitate everything else. It'll dictate how you behave towards the birds. You be kind towards them. It'll dictate how you be towards other birders. You be kind towards them. You be welcoming. As we were talking about before, it's most gratifying to when the birds ignore you. So they accept you as part of their environment. You're no longer an intruder. And for me, that's really and truly ethical birding is about not being an intruder, being kind to everything, making sure that the bird in birding remains the most important part of it. Yeah, so I think like a lot of other things can be said regarding the nitty-gritty of how we should behave in certain situations, but I believe if we just allow ourselves to be kind and to be guided by that kindness and guided by the love that we have for each other as birders and for the birds that we see in nature in general, then we'll never have a problem in terms of
I love that, Faraaz.
Thank you.
Christa, did you have anything to add or a different viewpoint on that?
Yeah, so I 100% agree. I think that especially when it comes to ethical birding, giving birds their space and allowing them to be them ultimately is the goal. And sort of a rule of thumb that we always have is if a bird or any animal that you're watching changes its behavior in response to your presence, then it means that you're too close, or whatever you're doing is disrupting its natural behavior. So kind of working backwards to try and integrate yourself better into the environment, like Faraz was talking about, just allows you to have a better experience in general. And I think too, not just for us going out birding on our own, but also if we were going to go somewhere and select an ethical guide, and trying to figure out who exactly you can trust to go with you when you're trying to select someone to go out with you and show a new location that you've never been to, or even in your own backyard. Choose somebody who has those and openly talks about having those same ethical values, and in particular, not necessarily giving assurances that you're going to see a bird or that you're going to handle birds or anything like that, because that, can never be guaranteed. And Faraz might be able to talk about this a little bit more since he does guiding down in Trinidad and Tobago. But, especially just, no baiting and other things that, ultimately, if you were going to be going out birding and you were going to be giving a bird their space, making sure whoever you're selecting for that endeavor is going to have those same ideals and ethics.
Absolutely, yeah. As a guide, for sure, it's I would add on that, definitely avoid a guide that can say, I can guarantee you this, and I can guarantee you that, when this and that refer to actual species of birds, especially species that are typically reclusive or not really often seen. I recently did a set of guidelines for ethical birding for the birding community here, and just use my position on the Rare Birds committee here to broadcast that message then. And I felt that there was some reluctance from some people to accept that, especially those who have seen the most species in a sense, because I know that if you have to see certain species, like there are some birds like cricks and rails that are excessively secretive, right? And you may need to get a picture, or you may need to document certain things. I know of people who used to document, who used to do counts, and if they're counting, let's just say a rice paddy, and we know that there are cricks in there. What they used to do is to go from one end, and they would take a rope and they would just drag it through the entire field, and they would count the birds as they flushed. And like it's a kind of, it sounds really bad, as many of our practices do, but in terms of what was the purpose of doing that. So if the purpose of it is for scientific research, to put in the book of birds of Trinidad and Tobago, well, this crake was seen here, and there was one black crake, which is rare or whatever, then that's okay, because it's not something that has to be done repeatedly, and it's not something that someone is doing for a completely frivolous reason. So there's always going to be an added dimension when you think of how it's going to be used. But if it's just to add to someone's life list that I've seen this bird or whatever, then definitely no, that's unacceptable.
That's the thing. I think, as you say, for a one-off or for scientific endeavour, so that it adds to the knowledge of that population.
Yeah.
And it's under a sort of a guiding hand, then acceptable. But the concern is that people will see how easy it might be to do certain things to draw birds out, like playing apps with the bird
Yeah,
calls on, for
yeah,
example, and not really having an understanding about what time of year it is and whether, you know, that's going to direct a bird's energy away from the nest building or the young it's looking after to come and defend its territory. Yes, it
of
draws the
course.
bird out, but and these are all things that I've only recently learned. And as Christa said, you know, finding a guide, if you're going somewhere and you want to see birds in a new location, finding a guide that's ethical, that's something previously that I wouldn't actually have thought of first.
Hmm.
I would have been looking at their descriptions and seeing, you know, oh, yeah, you can see this bird and that bird. And now I understand, and personally I I want to put the bird first. If I don't see the bird, then I don't see the bird.
That's right.
So I'm much more likely now, well, in fact, I would be certain to now, check out the guide's credentials to make sure that they are ethical birders.
Hmm.
But have you got any tips for individuals, people who aren't guides, people who are just going out? What kind of things should we as birders, perhaps new birders as well, who haven't really had a long time to learn about the behaviours of birds, what kind of things should we be watching out for so that we don't fall into, you know, unfortunately putting a bird at risk or putting stress on a bird that we don't need to do? What kind of things could we think of doing?
Um, Krista's pointing at me. Yeah, I would say just really being mindful of the bird's behavior, and that let that be your guide, in the sense of sometimes birds might be disturbed by someone playing a call, right? Sometimes birds may be disturbed by you walking in a particular place, and you'll find that, well, if I walk behind this bush, this bird just keeps flying back and forth. But when I come back out, it's it's not doing that and it's sitting one place, but now I can't see it, right? So then you might be tempted. But if I want to see it, I'm going to just go here and see, go back and forth, um, and you have that as a nice story to tell your friends who don't know anything about birding, and they'll think, wow, that's great. Um, but really just to be aware of well, this bird was not doing this before, right? It's wasting energy, and maybe I should not do this, right? So again, like regarding how it is in terms of ethical birding, it's just to be aware, to be mindful of the bird's behavior, and if you are altering that behavior in some way, then remember, our presence in nature is an intrusion because we're not from there. So anything above that, anything further than that is going to be that was a carrot grackle that just flew
Yeah,
past and
he
jumped in
agreed
it.
with
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
Yes, you don't belong here.
yeah, precisely. They moved in a few years ago. The grackles here, they're not typically from here, but as with increased urbanization, they moved in a few years ago. A gang of about maybe like eight, and the adult male just came up, and there was like, I think there were two adult males, really big and full of themselves, and he came and he flew up to a tree right next to where I was, and he glared at me, and I'm like, okay, all right, I know what you guys are about. Sure, you do your thing.
Because, Christy, you do research into, is it great-tailed grackles that you're researching?
Great-tailed grackles. Yeah, I'm part of a research project studying them right now. Yeah.
So do they have similar behaviours? Are they quite assertive birds?
They are, grackles I think are just generally known for being their own boss.
Yeah.
They don't take it from anyone. And, they're quite chatty and everything like that. So, up here, we're at the northernmost part of their range for the most part, for the great-tailed grackle. And they're not as common as a lot of areas down south, so they're not considered as much of a burden or a nuisance at the feeder, or so for me, whenever I get to see them, it's a joy, and they're just a lot of fun to watch. But
Yeah, I saw a great-tailed grackle in where was I? In Malibu. Sorry, just I'll name drop. I was thinking it's an M word and it's in California. When I went to Los Angeles a couple of years ago, and it landed near me. I was at the Malibu boardwalk, which is near Malibu Beach, and I thought it was a grackle as soon as it landed. Well, actually, no, I didn't. I thought it was a crow when it first landed. Then I saw its head and realised it was a grackle. They've got sort of sharper beaks, and they look a bit more. They kind of look a bit like large starlings, or I guess. But luckily, I got a photograph of it because I noticed that it had a wide tail, and the only grackle that I'd noticed in my bird book was a boat-tailed grackle. So I thought, oh, it's a boat-tailed grackle, and just thought that. And then later on, when I was looking back through to find out more about them, I found that boat-tailed grackles are generally found on the east of America. And the great-tailed grackle was the one that was in that range. But yeah, so I have seen one, but it sounds like you've been seeing lots, Christa.
Yeah, they're actually kind of considered rare for this area, but there's pockets where there are dozens and dozens of them. In some cases when they're roosting, especially in the wintertime, you can see maybe a couple hundred. But yeah, they're really cool birds, I think. And they do have that beautiful big tail, which, they'll use to their advantage, especially during breeding season. They use it to fan out and flaunt around for the female, and they'll use it to express dominance over other males too. So yeah, they're really cool.
Gosh, it's so fascinating. There are so many wonderful birds.
Yeah, of course. Susie, I've also seen one great-tailed grackle. And it was actually the first great-tailed grackle ever seen in Trinidad. And it was totally by mistake. I was a 100% novice birder, and I was just birding around one of the, I used to work on the industrial port here some years ago. I was just, ran off to do some birding, and I saw this bird and I photographed it, but I had only been birding a few months. And I sent it to some people, and I just included it in the album or whatever. And I said it's probably like a giant cowbird or something like that. But I'm ashamed to say that that's what I thought it was now, but it happens, right?
Absolutely, they're similarly related.
It's true, yeah. And it turned out to be a great-tailed grackle. It was a female, and it was a young female. And as you all know, it's found on the western side of the U.S. So it was way out of its range. It bamboozled everyone. But eventually, that bird reached adulthood and hybridized with some of the native Carib grackles. Yeah.
Wow.
That was
so cool.
A plot twist. Yeah.
Yes. I realise we've moved a little way away from ethical birding, but I think the takeaways from that we had from that conversation were definitely ones for me to take on board. Was watching out for looking at the behaviour of the bird. So first of all, don't intentionally try to change their behaviour, with a caveat, because I'm just thinking about times when you go out and you go to areas where birds do actually approach for food. And so you are changing behaviour by feeding, but there are some birds where it's kind of it's this graduation, isn't there? Like you feeding a snowy owl to draw it out to get photographs. That is a definite no. That's a definite no.
Definitely, of course. Yeah.
Having a couple of peanuts in your hand that a black-capped chickadee will come to get. Yeah. I get a lot of pleasure out of that. So I'm hoping that's okay. But again, you're still changing its behaviour. So really, to be purely ethical, you shouldn't be doing that. But
yeah, I think it all boils down to what is happening after. What is the two things? What is happening after? Like, are you drawing out a bird, or are you changing its behaviour to contribute to the greater good of the bird? Or is it for some selfish reason? And the second thing is, does the change in behavior then put the bird at risk? So does the black cat is the black cap chickadee at more risk from, taking peanuts out of your hand? Like if it comes out that humans have some like they're allergic to sweat or something like that, like the chickadees get, affected by sweat in your palms or whatever, then maybe then it's a bad thing. But if there's no discernible disadvantage to the bird, then I wouldn't say it's an entirely bad thing.
And generally, it's in places where the birds have already habituated to humans. It's in parks and things where they they just see it's a food source to go away and cache. But the thing is that what you were saying there, where I've heard about baiting of like snowy owls to bring them out,
Hmm.
often these birds are already drained of energy.
Oh
And so
yeah.
they're coming for the food that's being offered because it's easy food, but the food quality may not be the best. And then, as you say, what happens to the bird after when
Hmm.
that photography group has moved on or whatever? So,
Yeah.
definitely with the sort of rare or larger birds that are more threatened,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, it'll also cause them to associate humans with food, which is never a good thing for any predator.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a pretty big distinction too with, backyard bird feeders and, feeding stations, bird feeding stations at a refuge or something like that. I know at some of the RSPB locations, there's some nice little viewing areas where you can kind of hang back a little bit and you can see the feeding stations and the different birds coming up to those versus, going out somewhere and specifically in that case it would be considered baiting for photography or to lure a bird out or something like that. I think there's some kind of gray area there. I know that there is some debate about this in general, I think, in the birding world. But yeah, those are sort of the two distinctions that I see is, backyard bird feeders where birds are more habituated and they're purposefully coming to that location to seek out food versus you kind of going into a bird's habitat to lure them into you
Oh yeah.
um, separately.
Yeah.
We've got an interesting question that's coming in from Tony. Why are gulls or seagulls a protected species? They aren't endangered. There's millions where I live, and you aren't allowed to kill them. Yet pigeons are seen as vermin. So, do any of you have a view on that? What I would say is that yes, in the UK, well, obviously it's not just the UK, but herring gulls are on a protected list. They're on the red list. And my understanding is that that's because their population has fallen massively in quite a short amount of time. So while in local areas there might appear to be large numbers of them, through habitat endangerment, or loss of breeding sites, their numbers have crashed. So where you live, you may find like large numbers, but as a population as a whole, they're declining. Have either of you got anything to say about that kind of issue?
I would just add that no one really knows the original range of the rock pigeon because of its close association with humans for thousands of years. Um, but they've more or less spread across the world. Whereas I think for the gulls, they are still within their home range. There's still their population, as you said, Susie, is still quite limited. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where Tony lives either, but there are certain protections that especially migratory birds have. So, for example, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, birds that are considered migratory, even if they're not considered endangered, they are protected for that reason. So, there's a couple of other reasons and larger justifications for it, sort of legally, also, and kind of going along the lines of what Faraz was talking about is some of it's just perception. Some people just because we have a perception about, or some people might have a perception about pigeons being vermin or not being vermin, that doesn't mean that they actually are. It's like that's a construct that we're placing on that bird
That's right.
too.
Yeah.
So So yeah, I would keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, I mean, pigeons have been incredibly adaptable at living in human habitats. So, whereas originally they would have lived on cliffs or, high mountain areas, and they would have had predators there that would have kept their numbers controlled. When they're living in the cities, they find their own ledges and places to roost, but they have much bigger numbers, and the predators aren't there. So I think with any population where in nature where there's a balance between predators and prey, when that balance is disrupted, you will get these population increases. And, it's the same with some mammals. We have populations of deer that are not predated but have to be controlled. And it's a hard thing to know about because no one wants to think about birds or animals being killed. But there are some populations that have to be controlled.
Especially for their larger population health. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So I wanted to also talk to you both about the topic of inclusivity, about how we encourage people to be more involved in the world of birding, but not just encourage people to come into birding. How do we as birders think about our language, think about our behaviours to make birding as welcoming as possible? Because what I've come to realise is the more people that enjoy birding and enjoy watching birds, the more people will become aware of the environment, and it's part of a much bigger picture. So while you might take intense joy in just looking at your garden birds, that's part of a whole, and the more you get involved in that, the more you realise that actually there's more things we should be doing environmentally. But there are lots of people that feel excluded from birding. So are there things that you know of that you can talk about that we can do on an individual level, and perhaps that some of us should be doing lobbying for on a societal level as well? What kind of things would you suggest? Over to you, Christa.
So let's see. There's a few things that come to mind initially, and one of the things that I always mention to people whenever I do a webinar or a workshop, or I'm just, in generally chatting with people, is, it doesn't matter where you are in your birding journey. It doesn't matter if your goal is to, do birding competitions or, get as many birds on your life list as possible, or if you're more interested in just, kind of recognizing the birds that are in your backyard or on your, your daily walk or something like that. It doesn't matter what your goal is for birding. Your birding journey is your own, and you're in the right place. So I think that sort of, eliminating this idea of what we think a birder is, or what standards we're placing on how someone's enjoying birds in general, as long as you're enjoying them and you're being kind to the birds and to other birders, that's what makes you a birder. And sort of, I think, acknowledging that and sort of spreading that word in general, just like Faraaz was talking about earlier, that overall kindness, will make, people who might be interested in birding, but who might be a little bit intimidated about, I'm not sure what I know, or maybe I need to know more to consider myself, a birder, or to even start or anything like that. No, anybody can just start. So I think that, in general, that's sort of one mindset to think about. And I have a couple more, but I don't know if you want to kind of go back and forth for us.
I would disagree 100%, and I'm quite enjoying hearing this. So you can go ahead. I'll chime in after.
I thought you said you disagreed 100%, and I thought, oh no, you just agree 100%.
Yeah, I just agree 100%. That's right. The accent problems.
No. Okay. Well, yeah, that's awesome. So I guess there's that, but then there's a couple of other things that I've implemented as far as, trying to be more inclusive, especially, like where we're on StreamYard, and this is going to go on YouTube and everything like that. And, on other people are listening in from social media platforms. And, as we're on those kinds of platforms, or we're posting about them, or we're talking about birding sounds or birding outings or birds in particular, adding image descriptions to the kinds of pictures that you're putting up, adding captions to your videos, so that people who have blindness or low vision, or hearing problems, like that, they're able to also be able to enjoy and engage and interact with the kinds of content and the kinds of things that we're putting out, and that you're enjoying as a birder yourself. And I do want to also direct attention, as far as that goes, to birdability and the incredible work that they're doing over there. If y'all haven't heard of Birdability, you can check them out at birdability.org. They have a link at the top for guidance documents, and I mean, literally, they have how to implement accessible outings for your community, how to use inclusive language in your workspace, in your birding outings, in your conversations with other birders or other people in general. It doesn't just have to be birders. So they have a ton of really good resources for that too, as far as just being more inclusive and inviting more people into the birding space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just recently watched a member of the Birdability group speaking with Faraaz on his, Learn the Birds. Bird is the Word. Was it the Bird is the Word, or was it?
No, I think it was one of the Learn the Birds webinars.
Yeah.
We had a Birdability presentation there done.
And I learned so much through that presentation, things that I could do personally, but also things that we could be doing more. They have I urge everyone to go and check out that website. What was it again? Birdability.org, is it?
Birdability.org. Yeah.
.org. What they've got is a campaign that they are running to have checklists for every birding site, so that you as a birder can submit observations of a birding site to say on their checklist how well it's accessible to people. And so they can build up this whole network of birding sites that people will be able to go to and find that they've got accessible platforms for wheelchairs, or for people that can't stand for long periods. They have viewing areas that are of different heights, so people have a chance to see. But all sorts of things, being able to rank a walk for the strenuousness or the height of the hills, or whatever, so that people of varying abilities can use them. But yes, the birding language and the being able to describe photographs or videos online, that was really useful for me. And so I've been changing the way that I refer to things. So I'm going to be using birding outings from now on rather than bird walks, as a very simple, very slight thing that I can make a change in, that will help others feel like they're included rather than they're excluded because they can't, for whatever reason, might feel excluded. But I think, again, it goes back to a kindness, and a respect for other people as well, but to think of other people. So, Christa, as you were saying about helping people feel like no matter where they are on their journey, their observations, their enjoyment, the way that they bird is valid. And we should all be careful not to make people feel like they're not good enough because they haven't seen 3,000 bird species, or they haven't seen the latest, bird that's turned up, or they can't identify 50 species just like that. Some of us, it takes a while for us to learn different species, and that's okay. But yeah, so the kindness and the respect, I think that works both, as you said earlier, Faraaz, that works both for how we treat the birds and for how we treat each other. That's a really great message. Was there anything else that either of you wanted to say on the on that
Yeah,
side.
I would just add that there is, like you can't tell someone how to have fun or how to enjoy themselves because, different people get enjoyment in different ways, right? So I think that it's bad of us as birders to try to dictate how someone else would go about birding. You know, not everyone needs to even have binoculars. You can bird without optical aids. You can bird without actually seeing the birds. You can. It's just about enjoying the birds. And just as I can't say, well, this is what you should do for fun, or this is what you should do to enjoy yourself. I cannot tell someone this is how you bird, because birding is enjoying the birds.
It is. And that's something I've really learned over the past few years while I've had the podcast, is that at first, although I called myself the casual birder, and I always joke with Faraaz about the fact that he's also a casual birder, which of us thought of this term first, but actually I'm sure it's been around for a long time. But I was a little bit, I lacked confidence a little bit about the fact that I know I'm not an expert. So I felt, well, what can I talk about birds? What can I say about birds? But actually, I've grown to realise that, yes, it's okay to be a casual birder. It's okay to be someone who perhaps does slow birding, who doesn't rush out to get as big a list as possible, but just enjoys the few species that they see. It's okay to be someone who rushes around getting as many species as possible. There's room for all of us.
Yeah.
But I think,
Yeah, that's right.
it's those people that sometimes have the louder voices, and it's remembering that not everyone has a loud voice in birding. So to make space to let everyone have a say, have a part of it, and we're all the better for it with birding. It leads to so much more.
Yeah, of course. I always bring it back to an analogy about the trees in the forest. So the forest is made up of a bunch of trees, but they're also made up of a bunch of little plants and ground cover and vines and mosses and all of these sorts of things. So if they were just made up of trees alone, then you wouldn't have the life. It would not be a forest. So, um, you know, not everyone can reach 300 feet into the sky. Some of us take a different path,
That
and
is
all
a
are
really
valid.
lovely, profound comment. Oh, that's really lovely.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Oh man,
That's it.
I just thought of it.
No, I'm like stumped for words now. That's just like it. Actually, we are getting close to the end of the podcast, the live broadcast. Sorry, Christa, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say, I'm going to have to reference that and attribute it to you from now on. It's beautiful.
Feel free. Feel free. It's just the forest.
It's just beautiful. Hopefully, this is all recorded, so we can have that little moment of us saying that, and we can post that everywhere. That's wonderful.
Everywhere, absolutely everywhere.
Just to finish off, have either of you got some top tips for birders out there? People, maybe new birders, or people that are looking to improve their birding. What's one thing they could try this coming weekend?
Okay, I'll go first. I'll volunteer myself. Enjoy your garden birds. Enjoy your garden birds and get to know them, because it's guaranteed that if you look at them, even if you've seen them a million times already, look at them again and look at them deeper, and you'll notice something different. And learn from them. They are going to be the best teachers, and especially in terms of birding. I don't know if you all heard the ruckus that's going on right now. So that's a grayish saltator. I know that even though I'm just hearing that noise, that there's a pair of them, because that's a call that they give when they're excited. So they're just like they live by us. So we get to experience them all the time. So yeah, that would be my advice for anyone, whether you're an experienced or novice birder. Just get a little bit more into your garden birds.
And if you don't have a garden,
I 100%
your local
agree.
park.
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Even to just look at the sky and look at soaring birds and so on, because vultures would be playing with each other and really enjoying themselves.
Sorry, Christa, I spoke over you.
No, I totally spoke over you. I 100% agree. And I think that, either way, if you're just starting out, it's less overwhelming to start smaller and to just go with a subset of birds that might be a little bit more easy to access, whether that's in your backyard or your local park or something like that. Starting with that smaller group is generally, less stressful. And also, if you're looking to enhance those birding skills, exactly as Faraz said, you know, what better way to do that than to know all the little details of this is what a bird looks like at different times of year. This is what a bird looks like when it's a juvie. These are the sounds that it makes, the kinds of behaviors that it has. And those things are not only going to allow you to get more intimate with that bird itself, but also the other birds that might be similarly related to it in its similar family group. And, you'll start to notice all the little associations that birds have with each other, the ways that they're different. And in general, that just helps to, enhance those skills if that's what you're looking to do.
Thank you. As you were saying that, my mind was going straight back to the beginning of the conversation where we were talking about the corvids and how in that family they have particular behaviours that actually quite a lot of the species have and display. And if you learn about the family in one element, that can help you to start to identify in another area. So it's important that we just keep watching, keep listening, keep experiencing the birds around us. So where can people find you if they want to find out more about the work that you do? Christa?
I'll go first this time, sure. So let's see, you can find me either on social media on Facebook or Instagram at Birding Tools, or you can check out my website at birdingtools.com. And the Birding Tools podcast you can find wherever you listen to podcasts.
Thank you.
And I'm just Faraaz Abdool, just my name, on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook. And I also encourage you to check out learnthebirds.com, which is an association that I'm affiliated with. And it's really just to spread birding awareness and knowledge of birds from various perspectives, to share that perspective globally. So we have a lot of different contributors from all sorts of different countries. The webinars we have are free every week on Thursdays. So it's always interesting to come and hang out, and you might learn something about birds.
Absolutely, and I've been attending some of those, and I'll keep watching out for them because hearing all the different perspectives and the different types of birding that goes on, whether it's sort of scientific research or if it's just people talking about the birds they're enjoying, but it's a really great way to learn about the birds around the world. Sometimes it can be a bit daunting just to open a guidebook and start looking through, but to hear people's experiences really brings it to life. And that's wonderful. Thank you so much, both of you. Thank you so much for joining me this evening, or this afternoon, or this morning, depending on where you are in the world.
Thank you for having us.
It's been fantastic.
Yes, thank you so much, Susie.
And thanks everyone for watching and for your questions as well. Thank you. I hope to see you all again soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
It's good to see you, Faraz, too.
Yeah, same here.